Hello, second graders, and welcome to our math lesson today. Today, we're going to be starting a new unit on geometry, which is learning about different types of shapes and angles. And we're going to start our unit by doing lesson 11.1, which is called three-dimensional shapes. So, in this lesson, we're going to actually learn what three-dimensional shapes are and some examples of three-dimensional shapes, and also some examples of real life objects that would be considered certain three dimensional shapes. So by the end of this lesson, we're going to have answered the essential question, which is what objects match three dimensional shapes? So let's take a look at the video and see some examples of three dimensional shapes and what some real life objects might be those certain three dimensional shapes.
Hey there! What's this? Someone left a baseball on the grass. I never noticed before, but baseballs have kind of a neat shape. Click the ball to get a better look. Oh, look, a drawing, and it is shaped like the baseball. So, what do you call something that has the same shape as a ball? I think there's a special name. I know that it's called three dimensional, but there's another name too. Do you know? Well, let's go find out more about three dimensional shapes. Then we'll learn the names of other shapes too.
All right, so hopefully we find out what the name of this shape is. If you think you know what the name of this shape is, then think about it in your mind and keep that answer in your head, because we will definitely be learning about what the name of this shape is. So when we do, you can see if you were correct or if it's called another shape that you've never heard of before.
Many real objects have this shape. Let's find some. Here are some real objects. Which of them have this shape? Does a shoebox have this shape? Yes, a shoebox does have this shape. All the surfaces of a shoebox are flat. What about a phone book? Does it have this shape? A phone book also has this shape. It has 6 flat surfaces. It also has a top and a bottom that match. Both the top and the bottom of the phone book are rectangles. Does a football have this shape? The football doesn't have this shape. It has no flat surfaces. Now let's look at this shape. Let's find the everyday objects that have this shape. Does a soup can have this shape? Yes, a soup can has a curved surface and 2 flat surfaces like this shape does. It also has a top and bottom that match. What about a paper towel roll? Does it have this shape? A paper towel roll has this shape too. Both the top and the bottom of the paper towel roll are circles. Does an ice cream cone have this shape? No, an ice cream cone doesn't have this shape. It has only one flat surface, and it doesn't have a top and bottom that match. How are these shapes alike? The shapes each have a top and a bottom that match. How are the shapes different? In this shape, the top and bottom are rectangles. In this shape, the top and bottom are circles. These are three-dimensional shapes. They can also be called solid shapes. One of these shapes is a sphere. A sphere has no flat surfaces. The entire shape is curved. Select the shape that's a sphere.
Okay, so she said a sphere is an object with no flat surfaces, and the entire shape is either curved or round. So when we look at each object, this object has several flat surfaces. This object has one flat surface. It is curved, but it's still a flat surface. This object has two flat surfaces, and again, its flat surfaces are curved and circular, but they are still flat. This object right here doesn't seem to have any flat surfaces. So if you were to put it down, it would almost kind of like roll away. So the whole object is circular and curved. And this was actually the object that was in the beginning of the video. So we now know that the name of this object that we saw in the beginning of the video is called a sphere. So a sphere is like a ball. So a ball is a really good example of a sphere, like a baseball, a soccer ball, softball. So this is called a sphere because it has no flat surfaces and the whole object is round.
That's right. This shape is a sphere. It's curved and has no flat surfaces. A cylinder is another three-dimensional shape. Cylinders have two flat surfaces that are opposite from each other. Select the shape that's a cylinder.
All right, so she said two flat surfaces that are opposite from each other. So if I look at this object, again, it has many flat surfaces, not just two. It has more. It actually has six flat surfaces on it. So that's not what the cylinder would be like. This object only has one flat surface, and then it has two kind of sides that meet at the very, very tip. So this one only has one flat surface, so that can't be the cylinder. And then this object over here, this one I do see two flat surfaces. And when we also look at it, we notice that the two flat surfaces that this object has, they're opposite each other. One's on the bottom and one's on the top. So this object must be the cylinder.
Great job! This shape is a cylinder. A rectangular prism has six flat surfaces that are rectangles. Rectangles that are across from each other are the same size. Which shape is a rectangular prism?
So when we look at this one, first of all, we know that it's not this one, right? Because it only has one flat surface, and that flat surface is a circle. So that can't be the rectangular prism. It has no rectangles in it. Now, if we look at this one, you can say that a square is a type of rectangle, but we still call it a square, right? And if we look at this object, it's made up of all squares. All the squares are the same exact size. They're the same length. Okay, so this is going to be called something different. So that leaves us with this one. This one is the rectangular prism, and you can actually kind of see the rectangular surfaces that are in the rectangular prism. There are still some squares too, but remember, she said that there's rectangular sides that are opposite each other. So you have one in the front here, and then one kind of in the back. And then you also have a rectangular on the top, and its opposite is the rectangle on the bottom. So this one is the rectangular prism.
That's right. This shape is a rectangular prism. A cube is a special type of rectangular prism. It has six flat surfaces that are all squares. So the sides are all the same length. Which shape is a cube?
Okay, and so we kind of talked about that before we found out the rectangular prism. So this object, again, has all flat surfaces that are kind of the same sized squares. So this one is called the cube.
Excellent! This shape is a cube. All of its edges are the same length. A cone has a curved surface. It also has one flat surface that's a circle. Which shape is a cone?
Okay, and so when we look at this one, it has one flat surface that is a circle. So this one is the cone.
That's right. This shape is a cone. Now let's match real objects to these shapes. Select the shape that matches the shape of a globe.
All right, so if you look at the globe, you notice that it's all circular. It doesn't have any flat surfaces. Again, if you were to take it off of its little like bracket here and put it on the ground, it would probably start to roll. So it has no flat surfaces and it's all circular. And so that kind of object we call a sphere.
That's right. A globe is a sphere. A sphere has no flat surfaces. Select the shape that has the shape of a funnel.
So if we look at the funnel, it has one flat surface and it's circular. And so if you remember, the shape that we call an object that has one circular flat surface was the cone.
Excellent! A funnel is a cone. Cones have one flat surface and a curved surface. Now, select the shape that matches the shape of the block.
Okay. And so if we look at the block, we notice that it has several flat surfaces, and all of the flat surfaces are the same sized squares. So in this case, this object is a cube.
Great job! A block is a cube. Cubes have six flat surfaces that are all the same size.
So before we move on, just take a few minutes and think of an example of an object or an everyday item that would be considered a rectangular prism, and think of an object that would be considered a cylinder. Go ahead and take a few seconds to think about that. Okay, so just two objects that I think of. The one that I think of when I think of a rectangular prism, she kind of mentioned it in the beginning of this video, is a shoebox. A shoebox is definitely a great example of a rectangular prism. When I think of a cylinder, one of the objects that sticks to me is like a soda can. Because it has two round surfaces, one on the top and one on the bottom, and so that's kind of what reminds me of a cylinder, is like a soda can, or any type of like aluminum can is a good example of a cylinder. So let's go on, and we'll hopefully get some more examples of different three-dimensional shapes and kind of different objects that can match those three-dimensional shapes.
Now let's practice with the personal math trainer.
Right. So it says select the shapes that have a curved surface. Okay, so the best thing to do is look at each one and see if they have any curved surfaces. So the first one is A, and A is the cone. And if you remember, the cone has the one thing about the cone is that it has one flat surface, and that flat surface is circular or curved. So a cone has a curved surface. Look at the rectangular prism here. If you remember, the rectangular prism is made up of all flat surfaces, so none of the surfaces can be curved on this one. So we're not going to click the rectangular prism. Let's look at the square. The square is very much similar to the rectangular prism in terms of the fact that it has all flat surfaces. So again, the cube would also not be an example of a three-dimensional shape that has a curved surface. Now we look at the cylinder. Remember about the cylinder, we have two flat surfaces on the top and bottom opposite each other, and those surfaces are circular or curved. So a cylinder has curved surfaces. And then lastly, E. This can be kind of tricky. So E is a sphere, and you can say that a sphere doesn't really have any surfaces um, because it's all, the whole object is curved and circular, but we like to think of the surface of a sphere as being the whole object. So this whole object, the whole surface of it is curved. So a sphere is also an example of an object with a curved surface.
Great work!
All right, nice job. And then this one says name select the shape name that matches this object. So if we look at this object kind of really closely, you can see that it is an ice cream cone. And this one's actually very easy because ice cream cone has the name of its shape in it. Ice cream cone. Okay, so but let's pretend that it didn't for a second. What would be something that we would need to know to figure out this object? Well, we look at the object and we notice that it only has one circular surface. And if you remember, the cone was the object that described itself as having only one circular surface. So that's how we know that it's a cone. All right, so our option is D.
Good job!
All right.
Now try your homework on your own with the personal math trainer. It includes the exercise you saw at the beginning of the lesson.
Okay, so I think that we are good to go and log on to Think Central and complete the assignment for 11.1. I think they gave us some really good examples of kind of the different three-dimensional shapes and kind of different objects that go with those three-dimensional shapes. So I think we are good to go and start our assignment for 11.1. So log on to Think Central and complete that assignment for 11.1. Okay, everybody, good luck on your math homework. Bye.